Testing, Environment and Community Committee, 26th of September.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Pounds and I'm the chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome you all to Cambridge City Council's Environment and Community Scrutiny Committee taking place at 6 p.m. on the 26th of September. I will now roll call councillors alphabetically by surname so that the public can see who you all are. Can you just let me know that you are present? So, Councillor Nesta.
Here, thank you.
Welcome. Councillor Ashton.
Present.
Councillor Dibkovic is stuck coming home from work. She hopes to join us very shortly. It's very unfortunate tonight, the weather. Councillor Glasberg. Good evening, Councillor Glasberg. Councillor Hawke. Good evening. Councillor Payne is also on her way and also stuck in the terrible traffic tonight. And Councillor Swift.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. We've had no apologies at all, and so no alternatives were required. We're also joined by Executive Councillor for Community Safety, Homelessness and Wellbeing. That's Councillor Holloway.
Present.
Thank you for joining us. And Executive Councillor for Climate Action and Environment. That's Councillor Moore. Thank you for coming. Now we have a little bit of housekeeping. On each agenda item, and after hearing the deliberation of the Scrutiny Committee, it's the responsibility of the Executive Councillor to make the formal decision. Now, the officers we have this evening are Director of Communities, Sam Scarf, on my right, Committee Manager, James Goddard, and Producer, Claire Tunnicliffe. Thank you for joining us. We also have other officers who very kindly come along tonight because we were having a little bit of difficulty with the online, which is now working, I believe, and hopefully. But I do ask you all if we could be fairly succinct, because some of these good people have come from a long way, and it's a terrible, terrible night. So I would appreciate that if we can be quite succinct in our answers and our questions, so that we don't run too late. Can I remind you, please, that everything on your desk could be broadcast at some point as cameras within the room follow the microphone being switched on. If you are following the Teams meeting here in the room, on your laptop, your audio, microphone and camera, it must be switched off. If the fire alarm sounds, please follow officers who will leave the room and exit the building via the Pease Hill staircase and exit. Do not use the lift. So the process for each agenda item will be that the relevant officer will give a brief introduction to his or her report. The Scrutiny Committee will then discuss the item and may ask questions of the officer and or the Executive Councillor for clarification. At the end of the deliberation, I will ask the committee to vote by a show of hands on the officer's recommendation. In the event of a tied vote, I will have casting vote as chair. At this stage, the Executive Councillor will be asked to make her decision. The view of the Executive Council differs from the view of the Scrutiny Committee. The decision will be deferred to the Leader of the Council. Only those present in the chamber can vote or propose or second recommendations. And for the comfort of councillors, officers and the public, I may choose to call short breaks during the proceedings. If councillors or officers require a break at any point, please indicate to me just by a show of hand and I will halt the proceedings at the next convenient opportunity. So we're moving on to agenda item 2. Please could councillors declare if they have any declarations of interest and also identify which item their declaration relates to. You may also make a declaration at any time during the evening should you think of something later on, and you may wait to make your declaration until the item. So do we have any, I can't see, do we have any declarations of interest this evening? No, we have none. Thank you. So there were, just before we started, because it's been a long break, and I hope you've all had a good summer, I just wanted to say a couple of words about the activities of the council that's been going on over the summer, because in my role as Deputy Mayor, I've been invited to a lot of events, and I've just been bowled over by the amount of things that are going on from the council and from charities across the city, which you will see in your wards, but not everybody sees. And the work is absolutely stupendous. Really, really lovely events for our residents. So I would like to thank all those charities who have been providing events and parties and days out, all sorts of things, because what they do is really marvellous. I'd also like to thank a couple of the council teams that I happen to to join their events, because again, the work was so professional, and really good support for the public. But particularly, I'd like to thank the Cambridge Pride team, because that was a spectacular event in spite of the torrential rain. Really lovely event. I'd also like to thank the Corn Exchange staff, the Cambridge Live team, because all the events that I went to at the Corn Exchange, the people just said what a marvellous job they were doing, how good they were, how helpful they were. So I think they really do need a word of thanks. And the other team that I thought was brilliant were the Active Lifestyles team. So I don't know if any of you have been along to those events, but they are really wonderful. They were well attended, lots of kids having a really great time. So thank you very much to that team. And then, of course, to the Folk Festival team with Frances Alderton and her team, because that was a brilliant event. And also, lastly, I thought I would like to thank Yvonne Donnelly and her team for the nighttime safety in this city, which means that young people particularly, but everyone can enjoy the city at night safely. So a big thank you to those. And now we're going to move on to the item 3, which are the minutes of the last meeting. So just checking what we were talking about last time. We were talking about the allocation of developer 6106 money, community grants, and the single equality scheme to promote equality, diversity, and inclusiveness. So does anybody have any comments on the minutes? Okay. Councillor Ashton.
Yes, it's just a quick one, Chair. I did bring it up about out-of-cycle decisions, and one of it was related to the material recycling facility. And I was just wondering, is confirmation, is that where now the recycling is going to Northern Ireland? Because I noticed in the press it said we aren't involved with actually the contracts. So I was just wondering, why is it on such a major topic that we share with South Commons that we're not involved in actually that contract? Because it seems, in a sense, when we're looking at our climate control now, that we're sending stuff to Northern Ireland when we've got a plant up the road. So I just wondered if that's what that referred to.
Councillor Moore, would you like to address that one, please?
Yep, I think that's a question for me. So our recycling contract was up for renewal. We have, over the past, I think had a contract for 10 years. It was a very good contract. We were lucky. This is where the recycling is sorted. Obviously, we put lots of different things in our blue bins, hopefully all recyclable. And then it gets sorted and then sent off to different places for where it's actually recycled. The contract was up for renewal. Up until now, we have been working in partnership with RECAP, which is all of the councils across the combined authority area. So that's all of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We agreed to go out together, and we looked to find a new recycling location that would continue what we'd done and be for the whole area again in one job lot. Unfortunately, the price that came back was 3 times the price that we've currently been paying. And we were advised that if we separated into separate, smaller lots, we might get a better price. So we agreed as the RECAP, as a partnership, to break up into separate lots, but we agreed that we would have an even price across the partnership. So we would all pay the same price, whether some areas had a good deal or some didn't. Officers have been working on this for 2 years. Obviously, it's been quite a headache. It got right to the line where we were worried, would we even have somewhere to send our recycling? Luckily, they have found somewhere. It wasn't that we didn't have a say in where it went, but it was that the county, despite themselves not being, is this too long? Because it is quite complicated. Not being, the county is a waste disposal authority. We're the waste collection authority, as are the other districts in the county. Despite them not being a collection authority, they had spare capacity in their officer team, and that's how we manage across RECAP. We each share, that's part of the benefit of being in a partnership. And they ran the procurement, and they said that legally it's totally fine. Thalia have looked into it, but the application from Thalia to be the new contractor did not fit with the procurement, and so they were not eligible. So therefore, officers have been looking for a new location. The best one that they found was in Northern Ireland, and it's a very modern, environmentally friendly facility, so we hope that more from there will be able to be recycled. Obviously, it's a lot further away. We're really lucky that we've had this sorting facility on our doorstep. The new contract is for 5 years. We plan as either as a RECAP area or just as the Greater Cambridge Shared Waste to be planning for what we do in the future, because it would be better if we were able to maybe be more in control of that sorting. We'd already planned to review, or we have been reviewing, how we will collect recycling in the future. For example, at one stage, obviously the government was thinking you might split it into you'd have like 7 bins, one for glass, one for... That's no longer possible, but it might be that you separate paper from glass and plastics. So we will have a better plan for 5 years' time, but in the meantime, although on the face of it, our recycling will be going further, obviously it was just going to Waterbeach to be sorted. It then could go anywhere to be recycled. We've been very lucky. We are not one of those councils where our recycling has been found by the side of the road in a developing country. Our recycling has been recycled in Britain and Europe, and that will continue. So the journey that our recycling takes could actually be the same or shorter. It's just the way it's separated. Sorry if that was too long. It is quite complicated.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to ask you anything further, is that okay if they just email you?
Yeah, just to say it was all due to... The contract ended at the end of August, but because it was so close to the line, just Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire are going to keep using the... it's called a MRF, Mechanical Recycling Facility, at Waterbeach for the next 6 months. So we're not going to Northern Ireland yet, but we will be. Thank you
very much. Does anybody else have any comments on the minutes?
No, could I just say thank you very much for that very detailed explanation, because I think that it is probably something that we've all been having questions from residents about. And I do agree with Councillor Ashton that it would have been good if we'd had a fuller explanation about what was actually happening with this and why a bit earlier. But thank you very much for explaining it.
Thank you. And
Can
did
I
you want to just make one more quick point, please?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to say it's been very close to the line, so it's only just been confirmed, and that's why it's been quite complicated because of the different partnerships. So sorry that the information's been not as good as, or the communication hasn't been as good as it could have been. And also when we had the question from the press, nothing was signed, so that's why that question needed to be a bit vague. But now that things are more signed, we can do a new press release.
Thank you. I just have one little thing to say about page 5 in the minutes, because I had somebody ask me about the herbicide use and the fact that some of the streets have not been cleared. And I think it's fair to say that we're all really pleased that we're no longer using herbicide. and spraying our streets, and everybody that I've spoken to has confirmed that. But in terms of actually clearing the weeds now, there's been a bit of a delay, and I've recently just received quite a detailed explanation of what is going to happen. We've bought some new equipment, it's going to move forward. So I won't spend time talking about it now, but if anybody wants me to forward the email with all the information, just let me know and I'll do that for you, okay? Right, so I'm assuming now that we're all happy with the minutes and that they are agreed. So we move on now to agenda item 4, which is public questions. We have 2 public questions that we've received, and I believe both the questioners are online. So what we do is we've all had paper copies of the questions, so we don't read them out. The Executive Councillor has 2 minutes to respond, and then I will ask the questioner if they would like a supplementary question. So the question 1 comes from Barney McCulloch, and it's a question to you, Councillor Moore. No, I beg your pardon, it's a question to Councillor Holloway. Apologies.
Thank you very much, Barney, for your question. I've been to the ping pong parlour myself several times, and it's a brilliant facility, really great fun, and there's loads of people using it all the time, certainly when I've been past, and when I've played there myself, so really supportive of it. I did actually write at the time of the Grafton proposals to the Grafton Centre saying that I thought it was a really important place for the community and that I wanted it to be retained. That was, however, one of obviously many responses to the consultation. Thank you also for sharing your experience of Parkinson's, and I'm glad to hear that table tennis is a sport enjoyed by so many people with Parkinson's. I hadn't appreciated that link that you highlight, so thank you for highlighting that, and I'm really glad that you and others enjoy playing table tennis, and it, as you say, can only be a positive thing for people's health and well-being. As far as I'm aware, we don't yet know exactly the size of the proposed new facility at the Grafton Centre. We at the City Council have asked the Grafton Centre to confirm what that's going to be. We're currently waiting on a response. But personally, I would be disappointed if it's going to be significantly smaller than the current one, because, as you point out, having that large facility where you can have lots of people playing at once is something quite different from just having 1 or 2 tables. We do, as a council, promote table tennis. We have several outdoor tables. We've got indoor spaces in our community and sports centres where there's table tennis is available as well. But I do recognise that having that bigger facility is something different again. So we will actually, the City Council officers, be meeting with Table Tennis in England next week to discuss potential options for indoor table tennis facilities in the city. There's also obviously ongoing discussions about what's going to happen at the Grafton Centre, but we wouldn't be able to guarantee that we would have that as an in perpetuity arrangement or necessarily free forever, as you asked in your question, but we do want to make sure there's a really good size facility available however we do that. I'd be very happy to discuss this with you further going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Holloway. I don't think the questioner is online.
We don't believe the question is online, Chair, and I wasn't given a supplementary question.
So there is no supplementary question. Our second question is Minji Ding, and the first question is about noise issues. So this one is also for you, Councillor Holloway? Oh no, it's for Councillor Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Minji, for your question. I have had communication with Minji previously around noise, both by phone and email. So just to say that although we don't have an out-of-hours on-call person in the night team for environmental health, we do have a night service for ongoing noise complaints. We used to have an out-of-hours night team, which was reliant on one individual, and then members of the team to volunteer to cover, because obviously that one individual couldn't work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that one individual left just for their own reasons, and we were unable to recruit to that role. The team, the environmental health manager, she reviewed the whole out-of-hours service for the council as a whole, not just for noise, but also for things like housing, homelessness, and had a plan for how we would cover that for the whole city, for the variety of council services. But unfortunately, we were not able to recruit into that role because it's a nighttime role, being out on call night after night. And at that same time that we were struggling to recruit to that role, a new app became available called the Noise app. And with that app, residents can actually, if they've got smartphones, use the app and record noise themselves. And if it's recorded through the app, it can be used in court. Because one of the main reasons to have the out-of-hours service is for our environmental health noise officers to record the noise and measure how loud it is and be able to then take action. So despite not having the on-call team, we do still take action on noise. But just to say, one of the examples given was about a big party and ambulances being called. Obviously, I don't know the details of that party, but it sounds actually that that would be a police matter. That's not something that the environmental health team would manage.
Thank you very much for that. Can I ask the questioner if you would like to ask a supplementary question? You have 2 minutes to do so. Can I take that as a no, you don't have a supplementary question? Or I'll come back to that if you find it easy.
Yes? Oh,
Thank you.
is that a question? Just to say there are no plans to merge with Peterborough Council. However, there was a motion last year, to consider whether this council would become a unitary council. Consultation was carried out over the summer to look into that, but there's no feedback as of yet from that. However, we do have some other partnerships with Peterborough Council. As I just explained, we've got one for waste and recycling. We're obviously both members of the combined authority, and I wonder if that could be what this question is really about. And then just regards to tax, councils, we don't really have very much, if any, power, or very little over how much tax people pay. So if there was a supplementary question, it might be good to explain exactly what tax you're referring to. Taxes are set by national government, but councils often collect them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Does the questioner want to ask a supplementary question on this one?
She did have a friend with her, but the friend is gone.
I think, it's not working, is it? Can I suggest, please, that if you have a supplementary question that you send it in by email? I think that's the best thing because we can't hear you online. So I'm not sure if you wanted to ask a question. Or
Yes, I will.
You do? Oh, right. Please do.
Yeah, I just want to ask some questions about I think you have the mediator team, which is to to deal with the disputes between neighbors. And I think that kind of service is useless. And you said you don't want to hire a person to set up a night team, but I think you can cut out the midday team and then save extra money to hire the person for the night team.
Would you like to respond, Councillor Moore? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I'm sorry if you haven't found the antisocial behaviour team to be useful. I can't really comment on, I don't know, although we've had interactions before, I don't know about your interactions with the antisocial behaviour team, but I do know that they have been very successful in a number of regards. As I said, it wasn't... the changes to the service wasn't about saving money, it was about not being able to fill the role and trialling the new app, which, as far as the team can see, it appears that we're taking the same level of action that we were before. You can't just tell people to stop making noise. There's a process to be followed. It involves gathering evidence. That can include keeping a diary of the noise. Obviously, the noise app is really helpful. And also then, if it is an ongoing issue, officers can arrange to come out and record the noise themselves. But I'm happy to speak to you further outside of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore.
Yes,
Minji,
please, yeah.
did you want to ask a supplementary question about your second question about the councils?
Yeah, for the council tax, it's increased every year, but I don't think the council do any job.
Would you like to answer, Councillor Moore?
Yeah, because I was kicked out by the council officers like playing a football.
Right. If you'd like to listen, Councillor Moore will give you a response.
Well, I'm very sorry if you feel that the council doesn't do a good job. I feel that obviously being a councillor, I've been a councillor for quite some time. One of the things that I think I would hope that also the opposition would even agree, that when you become a councillor, you realise actually the scope of the work that the council does and the high quality of that and the good service that's given. However, obviously, the council is full of humans, so mistakes are made and we're always trying to do better. So I hope that most people would appreciate some of the work that the council does. For example, the waste and recycling collection is very high, over 99% currently. Obviously, there's a lot more, but I do appreciate that you have been very frustrated, particularly around noise. Noise is... If you've got ongoing noise complaints, then that is very disturbing to your life and can have a real impact on people's quality of life. So I do understand that, and I'm sorry about the impact that's had on you. Thank you.
Could I suggest, if you have particular issues, that you try and discuss them with your ward councillor, Minji, because they will know your locality and the particular problems, and I think they're probably the best... Oh, it is you, is it? Right. Well, I think Councillor Moore is always happy for you to email her, talk to her, if you have any particular issues. Thank you very much for your question. So that ends our public questions now, and we move on to item 5 on your agenda, and we're looking at... climate change strategy. This is a huge portfolio, and I think a very important one. It impacts actually on every aspect of what the council does now, which reflects just how important it is. So we have officers tonight. We have Janet Fogg, the climate change officer. We have Danette O'Hara, also climate change officer, and our presenting officer, which is Andrew Lim. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual report that we bring each year to this committee on progress with the climate change strategy. I think hopefully it provides you as a committee with a good opportunity to scrutinise what the council's doing on this hugely important agenda. The report is structured around the 5 priorities and key themes in the strategy. It covers a very wide range of activities, so I kind of half apologise for the kind of the length of the report. It kind of runs to something like 60 pages. I've sat and read it on the kitchen table a couple of times, and I feel torn between kind of drowning you in information, but also the sense of hopefully usefulness you find in the information provided there, and also the reassurance at the scale and breadth of activity the Council is taking on this agenda. And I think it's the breadth of activity that kind of really strikes me. I'm sure there are instances of other councils that are doing individual things very well, maybe differently, maybe better than Cambridge does, but I don't think there are many councils that do such a broad spectrum of kind of activity as this council does. And that's reflected by some of the accreditations that the council has achieved over the last year, such as becoming an A-list city and the Carbon Disclosure Project, being described as or ranked as the second most progressive district council on climate change by Climate Emergency UK. And just to kind of, I suppose, provide an additional bit of information for the council, we've recently, or within the last few days, decided to subscribe to or join Climate Action Coalition, which will just be another way of kind of sharing and progressing our ambitions around this. We'd always want to do more. I'm sure you would want us to do more, and our residents would want us to do more. But I thought from the 60 pages, I'd draw out a few of the points that had struck me when I was going through this. So first and foremost of those is the more than 10% reduction in the council's own direct emissions, captured in the greenhouse gas report, which I know Janet circulated, I think, separately yesterday. And that's notable this year, even more than in other years, where I think we've been quite open about the fact that in previous years, the reduction in our emissions has been partly due to actions we've taken, but also partly due to just the general greening of the national grid. And that's just a fact which is helping more broadly. This year, as I understand it, or the year we're reporting on, the national grid actually didn't green it brown, or whatever you would call it. It became more carbon intensive. So the electricity we were taking from the national grid and other carbon factors kind of went in the wrong direction. So for us to achieve a 10% reduction in that context is really quite impressive, and that's driven largely by further work done to decarbonise the council's pools, but also the use of hydro-treated vegetable oil in some of our waste fleet and in other vehicles and in generators at events and so on. I think those are the primary drivers of that kind of progress. I was also struck by the work being done on council housing, both existing council housing, including the net zero carbon pilot, taking 50 existing council homes towards net zero status over the course of this year, and the fact that we've now got something like, I think, 500 homes being built to passive house or near passive house kind of standard as part of our new build programme, which I think is very impressive and has become part of the way that the council does those things. Another thing I know was close to many councillors' hearts was achieving of Gold Sustainable Food Places accreditation, which happened in March this year and was testament to the direct support of a number of councillors over a period of years, but also grant funding the City Council and a number of officer inputs to that. So I think we're the only district council to have achieved that kind of gold status, and I think only the third city in the whole country. So that felt like a notable achievement. I asked the climate change officers what they thought was important, and Danette, who's online, had kind of mentioned the work to achieve outstanding certification from the Greener Festival certification kind of scheme for the Cambridge Folk Festival again, which is partly due to the reduced use of plastics on site, the fact that we hosted a repair and recycling cafe on the festival site, and again the use of HVO in some of the generators there. So a whole range of kind of, I think, a holistic look at kind of the sustainability and carbon footprint of the festival and other open space events that the council hosts. And finally, EV charging facilities, which I know has been a kind of an interest for members of this committee for a number of years. I think we've got to somewhere around 87 charge points installed now in our car parks at no cost to the council through the contract that our city services team, particularly Sean Cleary, negotiated with a company called Connected Curb. There are another 23, I think, in train and more on the way. So there's a total target of getting to several hundred charge points in due course. So we've now got a better kind of ratio of charge points for the population than we had previously, and going in the right direction. And I think about 10 days ago, we just heard that we'd won the British Parking Association EV Evolution Award for 2024, which may not mean much to you, but I think it's just an indication again of how well considered that is in a national context, the work that we've done on EV charging. So, not wanting to be smug or complacent at all, ever, on this critical agenda, But I think I take some reassurance from the breadth of activity that's gone on, the progress that's been made across a number of agendas, and I hope the committee finds that too. And of course, we'd be happy to take questions. And I would thank Janet and Annette for all the work they've done, both to kind of progress some of these actions, of course, even support colleagues across the whole council. It is a council-wide effort, but putting the report together, as you'll see from the depth of it, is a major task, which Janet does, but also for coming here through the rain from flooded wastelands of Bedfordshire tonight. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair. Let's have to take questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I don't know, Janet, if you wanted to add anything, because your report came in at the last minute, and we have read it, but or else do you want to wait and see if there's any questions? Yeah, fine. And perhaps the same for you, Danette, if you'd like to wait and see if there's any questions that come, that's your area, and then if you wave at me, I'll let you in. And thank you, Andrew, also for the action plan, because that was really helpful, because it just gives us an overall picture of what is a very big portfolio, and the work is really, truly impressive. So now I'll open the debate then. If we have any questions, I have Councillor Nestor, and Councillor Houck, and Councillor Divkovic. I will take three and then see if there's any more.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just for disclosure, Cambridge Zero has been mentioned a couple of times on the report, and I do work for Cambridge Zero, so I just wanted to make that disclosure in case of anything. But my question is in relation to page 21. Well, first of all, well done on being named as an A-list city and council by the Carbon Disclosure Project. And it is good that you have taken the recommendations and updated the climate adaptation plan. But it sounds quite concerning that basically 27 of the 61 possible climate risks are relevant for Cambridge. So my question is, have you shared this adaptation plan with residents or our partners in the city and county? Thank you.
Would you like to take three questions, or do you want to answer? Yeah. So Councillor Houck next.
Thank you very much for the huge effort that clearly went into this. And even though it's, of course, sad to see that it's now necessary, but I do welcome the new climate risk and vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan. So I can't argue with the judgment of the Carbon Disclosure Project. So congratulations for the A rating, and the other awards that you mentioned clearly reflects the huge effort that went into there by the whole team. But of course, as you also mentioned, so awards don't make climate change go away. So we should strive to do as much as we can, and there's still a lot to do. So I actually have 5 questions, which I hope are all clear and relatively easy to answer, so nothing that challenging. I mean, I don't know, I'll leave it to the chair how you want to. It's actually less than 1 question per 10 pages. It's a long report, so there's a lot to. Okay, let's start. Yes. So I mean, in the background, in section 3.1, it just says sort of that Cambridge should be net zero by 2030. And then later in 324, it specifies this, that it's actually supposed to be the corporate buildings, fleet, and business travel that are supposed to be at net zero by 2030. I'm just trying to be clear. So what is the aim and what is going to be measured? And it looks like we are plateauing a bit because the national, what can be done by the national grid, for example, has been done. So in the next 5 years, can we really achieve this? With respect to the 20% net biodiversity gain in the civic quarter, I'm just curious how much biodiversity there is currently in the civic quarter. So can we get 20% just by putting 2 more flower pots next to the fountain, or is there something better, something bigger planned? And I just recently read a little bit more about Singapore, obviously very different scenario, but they pride themselves as being a city in the garden. So they have lots of projects on roof gardens, vertical gardens, and so on and so forth. So I wonder whether that's actually some inspiration for Cambridge as well. Finally, a bit more local, maybe. There have been 19 community action days over the last year, I think. I was just wondering, have we used the full budget for those? Is that basically the most we can do? Because I find them very useful, and also in the future, could they be paired with repair cafes, for example? Then Appendix A mentions green investments from the general fund reserves in item 1.8. I'm just curious what this is, if there are any plans for those. And I mean, finally, it's clearly mentioned that resident engagement is important. I mean, we only have control over less than 1% of carbon emissions. And I would like to know, with all the restructuring of the redevelopment of the Guildhall, is there actually space for something like a physical home decarbonization service, a proper center, a room, a physical place in the center of the city for residents where they could go and get more information and inspiration? Okay, thank you very much for your patience.
So I think we'll ask you to answer those 6 points in actual fact, isn't it, Andrew, if that's okay, otherwise we will lose the thread.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you, councillors, for your questions. I'll do my best, but I think I've probably forewarned in the briefing that we wouldn't know all the details, so if we didn't have the questions in advance, we may need to take some of them away and get back to you, but anyway, we'll see. So on the question of have we promoted the adaptation plan, I think it's on the website, so whether that equates to promoting it, I don't know, probably not as much as you may wish, so we could probably include think about how we communicate that better. We'll take that away and give that some thought, whether we could put something in Cambridge Matters or whatever we could do with that. So thank you for that suggestion. Councillor Hawke's questions. So we try and be clear about this every time when we kind of frame the strategy, and it was adopted back in 2021 or whatever it was. The target relates to the City Council's direct emissions. So that's what the target is about. The idea that the city itself, more broadly, could become net zero was always a vision that was always dependent on the government, business and others kind of making it possible for that to happen. That would require an awful lot of investment and probably quite a lot of regulatory change and so on. So that's something that the council would like to see happen, but it's not within the council's gift. So we're hopefully reasonably clear on that, and I hope that helps. In terms of the civic quarter, biodiversity net gain, I don't know the detail of that, so I can take that question away to ask colleagues, unless anybody in the room thinks they do know all the detail, but probably not. So the community action days, have we used up the budget? I do not know. I can take that away and ask a question of colleagues who would know. But it's a good question, and hopefully we get the maximum benefit from the budget. Green investments referred to in the general fund, I do not know. I will take that away and ask colleagues and see if we can get back to you on that, unless anybody else has any other insight. No, okie dokie. And will the Guildhall include space for a decarbonation kind of centre? Not to my knowledge. I think the thinking about what could go into the Guildhall and the civic quarter more broadly as part of that programme is still being considered, discussed. There's been a public engagement process that's still going on, and others again may know more about that. I think the idea of a Cambridge room, which was being promoted by the architecture kind of department of the university, is happening, has got planning permission, and Councillor Moore may know more about that, but I think that was one of the ways that there was a thought of trying to create a space for discussion, debate and so on as part of this. But I'm also conscious that there's a very active community sector kind of activity on retrofit and so on, including Cambridge Retrofit Hub, or whatever they call themselves, which are kind of establishing themselves in the city to make more information and support more available for people who want to do retrofits to their homes. So, and the council obviously produced its fantastic Retrofit Your Home guide, which we continue to promote at every opportunity. Joe could talk at great length about the other things we do in terms of providing a framework for accessing kind of capacity operatives or whatever to do it, and potential sources of funding and so on. And through the City Leaders Group, which you attend, we are trying to work with Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership to kind of explore what are the barriers for kind of scaling retrofit and kind of doing thousands of homes rather than tens or hundreds that we tend to be doing at the moment. So that's a kind of another example, I would hope, of kind of meaningful collaboration with the kind of the academic expertise and the business community that exists around the place to try and do more further through collaboration. So thank you for those questions. I hope they give some useful answer, and I apologise for not knowing more about lots of detailed points.
Thank you very much. Do you have any more questions tonight? Yes, so Councillor Dibkovic.
Sorry, Chair.
Could I just quickly...
Oh, yes, please. So I'll just note that Ashton and then Councillor Jasberg.
Yeah, thank you. Just really two small points. Just that the adaptation, the risk assessment was sort of finalised in time for this meeting. So obviously now it's been to the meeting and it's obviously available on the webpage, as Andrew said. Then we will look to promote it and make sure people are aware of it and the actions that we're already taking, and hopefully link into the actions that residents can take as well. Because hopefully it's even more pertinent at the moment with the flooding that people are experiencing, perhaps not in Cambridge, but in more local areas, as Chair said. Yeah, hopefully that would be a good thing to be able to link it into and make people aware, and hopefully they're interested in it as well. And just second point, I think my understanding of biodiversity net gain is that it's 20% above what's currently there. And I think they mentioned tree planting to provide shade and things like that. So hopefully it will be an increase that we're not already at 20%, that 20% will be on top. But, yeah, hopefully that's the case.
Thank you very much. Councillor Divkovic.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding charging ports for electrical vehicles. It's excellent that we're obviously providing new charging ports, and there's plan to have more in the city. My question is obviously, this is regarding reducing carbon emissions from transport in Cambridge and supporting the take-up of electric vehicles. Is there something that we can do, or does the council already do something to reward people that do obviously have electric vehicles but want more charging ports? So some resident associations want EV charging ports in North Cambridge. Is there a way that they can maybe request one in specific locations? Is something like that available for them? I do have a second question, if that's okay. So my second question is regarding the action plan, which is in Appendix A, and it's regarding future tenders. So looking at when the council's reviewing tenders, looking at our expectations around climate change, and it's also 1.11, which is exploring the potential for review of climate change and sustainability commitments by existing suppliers as well. I was just wondering, is there anything already in place for this when the tenders are assessed and looking at these companies' climate strategies, or what is your plan? I know there is. I know that in July it says they're working through a program. What does this look like? And obviously, it's good that we're setting the standard, and other companies and other tenders will then follow suit in the city. But I'm just wondering if we could have a little bit more detail on that.
Thank you. Would you like to answer those two, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Divkovic. On EV charging, I think the City Council's work is primarily around putting charge points into our car parks, because that's where we own land and kind of, we've got some control of that. In terms of residents requesting kind of charge points on their streets, my colleague Joe Dix has been heavily involved in discussions with the County Council for many years to try and explore what may be possible. And I think the County Council previously wasn't particularly receptive to this, but may be changing, and Joe could probably give an update.
Yeah, I can probably give you a little bit of an update. So the sort of strategic plan for delivery of charge points has moved to the combined authority, and there is now a working group there with some funding to support the development of a strategy to roll out charge points across the county. We across the whole combined authority area. We previously have had a couple of pilot projects which I ran with county council colleagues. So we did install charge points into the Riverside area and the DeFrevel Avenue area with some central government funding and a lot of support from the district network operator, UK Power Networks. And so we were able to put 40 charge points into those two residential areas. And there was a lot of learning from that project, which we're taking forward into the combined authority partnership. So I think that rollout of a programme is likely to start in the next 12 months, but it might not necessarily be in Cambridge. It might start in some of the areas that are of the county that are less likely to be able to generate charge points at the moment, and have a very, very low level. In addition to that, we have also got a network of around 20 chargers which were initially put in to support the electrification of the taxi fleet. Most of those are now open for public use, and they're rapid chargers, so they're quite good for servicing sort of casual demand as well. So those are available. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. And on your second question, through the Chair, on the procurement kind of stuff, we're developing a social value framework. There's new procurement regulations coming in from nationally kind of imposed, so we're kind of developing that at the moment. So I don't think I can kind of tell you exactly kind of precisely what's happening, but it's something that we're very actively working on, connected to our community wealth building strategy, and very keen to kind of see how we could use the council spending power to kind of, put a, I don't know, expectation, but, a requirement on suppliers to kind of report their kind of impact and hopefully nudge them towards taking more action themselves. So it's kind of a new avenue for us. It's something we're kind of exploring more actively now. And I'm kind of quite excited that something will come forward from that. Sam Sharp is kind of leading our community wealth building implementation, so you may be closer to it than I am, but it's as I say, it's a new area of activity that we're moving into going forward. And I think this current climate change strategy has another 18 months to run, so we'll be, I expect, writing a new one over the course of that time, where we might start to look into some of these issues more broadly, including whether, for instance, we start to measure Scope 3 emissions. So that might come back to kind of one of Councillor Hall's kind of interest as well. And you'd need to do that through your procurement framework. So it's something that we are keen to do as far as it's possible, and as far as it isn't punitive or disadvantageous to small and local businesses and that kind of thing. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. So there's Councillor Ashton, yes, and then Councillor Gasberg.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, but I'll only ask one at the moment so the people get their questions in. And hopefully you will be able to answer them. They're quite simple because it's a question from me. There's a lot in the report about what we're doing across the council, but as you've already alluded to, we're only 1% of the city's emissions. So how are we sharing what we're doing and achieving with other businesses and organisations to help them reduce their emissions?
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. And Councillor Gasberg, would you like to give your question as well, and then the officer will answer them both?
Well, actually, my question was on the same point, because I noticed that on page 23, you say that the emissions from commercial sources and from public sector are much higher than in other areas. So I think it would be useful to know why that is. And like Councillor Ashton, I'd like to know what the City Council can do about it. We're obviously doing a great job, but we need to be able to spread the word. I've got another question that I wanted to ask, but if we could answer that one first, great. Thank you.
Yes. Would you like to answer that one, Andrew, please?
Another stab. And I think Janet can help, particularly on the kind of the emissions kind of point. So in terms of Councillor Ashton's question about what we're doing to promote business, so I think it's kind of around Objective 4, so pages 26 onwards of the report. There's a range of things we're doing to help residents and businesses reduce their emissions and to know about what we're doing and to kind of find ways to kind of do more themselves. So, for instance, off the top of my head, I know we've funded some green business grants to kind of give up to 5,000 to small businesses to take action to reduce their own carbon footprint. We've promoted our activity through, obviously, Cambridge Matters and other information we put out. We funded Cambridge Carbon Footprint to develop a carbon calculator and tool for kind of helping people work through how they could reduce their emissions. And there was a specific business element to that we asked them to produce to make it more meaningful for businesses. Businesses are very busy trying to survive, just trying to kind of make a living and so on. So their time and space and capacity to do some things we do is limited, so we try and make it easier for them through those kind of means. There is, at the other end of the spectrum, at the kind of more strategic end, we created a group called the Cambridge City Leaders Climate Change Group, where we bring together businesses with academics and other public sector bodies to kind of share information and see what we could achieve more together. So again, that work on retrofit is something where we're talking to businesses, suppliers, and so on. I suppose we're working with Hill on developing, everything through the Cambridge Investment Partnership around kind of passive house standard housing, and probably lots of other things that I've forgotten. But hopefully the report gives you a bit of an insight into that. We can't force or tell businesses what to do, but we want to encourage and support them, and that's kind of probably the space we're in mostly, I think. But Janet, do you want to?
Yep, thank you for your question. This is my pet subject. This data is obviously drawn from nationally produced data by national government. It's 2 years in arrears, but it's very helpful to us to understand where we need to prioritise our activity and where we need to look to help people and influence people to reduce their own emissions. And yeah, I'm just pointing out, I suppose, in the report that we are quite unique. We are unique in the sense that we have a lot of commercial properties, we have a lot of public sector buildings, that contribute to this emissions total, which in contrast to other cities where they perhaps have higher industry, emissions from industry, or even our local colleagues in Cambridgeshire districts, they're more likely to have much higher agricultural emissions. So we're quite different to other cities in that way. Most places, most local authority areas have domestic as their top emissions, so we're not dissimilar in that. Commercial and public sector are very high because of the types of organisations that are within the city. We've got lots of hospitals, lots of educational authorities, lots of councils, and obviously lots of shops and things that count towards the commercial sector. So that's why obviously, as Andrew suggested, we work as well, where we can with organisations, with our local universities, and also through the city leaders with the local large organisations, which include educational and health, and the large businesses that you would think of that are within the city. So it's just to focus people's minds on the sorts of sectors that we need to concentrate, because of the fact that they're the biggest contributors, of which we are obviously within that purple segment of public sector as well. Some years it changes around, so it's quite interesting to sort of see what's happening and what's going on and who's perhaps doing better and kind of reducing. Our transport is obviously quite low as well. We don't have a lot of large motorways that go through our area, and we obviously have a lot of people that do cycle and walk where they can. So that's why that's quite low in comparison to other local authority areas as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Swift was next, and then I'll come back to you. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
It's just the fact that we're a very unassuming council. We do unbelievable achievements, and obviously the press don't like reporting good things, so we need to bang our own drum. So I wonder sometimes, the City Council webpage is not something you turn to look for what's happening. So could we not use our own buildings where we have notice boards, like here in Mandela House? We've won some amazing awards, and it would be lovely to see that being shown. So when people go past, they can go, God, guess what we've done? Because like I say, nobody else is going to do it. We need to bang our own drum, but find ways of doing it, again, which fit our carbon footprint, that aren't going to be, causing more problems. But I think there are areas around the city where we can let people know what we are doing, and it's not just words. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent point, Councillor Ashton, and it's one that I often said as well, is that, communication and telling people, because we're doing a fantastic job. So, Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a sort of follow-on from Councillor Dickovic about electric charge points. In the De Freville estate in West Chesterton, which I represent, there have been there are lots of electric charge points for cars. But I walk through there every evening, usually when it's not raining, and usually there's no cars being charged. I don't think I've seen a car being charged. Apparently the tariffs are a lot more expensive in roadside electric charge points, and I'm just a bit concerned that if we were to roll out lots more, they might not be used very much and might not actually contribute very much to addressing the climate emergency. And that was the first point. Second one is about slightly exotic, it's about bin lorries. When can we expect the WREN solar PV project for our bin lorries to be completed, please? Thank you very much.
Andrew.
Well, I'll leave Joe to deal with the kind of charging one again, because that's much more his expertise than mine. And on the WREN project, the last I was told was they were hoping to get to a point of delivering it by, I would say, the end of next year. Is that possible? The end of 25, maybe? Don't quote me on that. I've just quoted it, but that's the latest information I have. Was it something like that? I don't know whether Rosie has more information, maybe. But yeah.
Yes, it was due to be sooner, but there have been a couple of delays. Firstly, we had a little blip with the Prime Minister that impacted the project, and then there's been some discussions around the land, but it all seems to be touch wood, going ahead now, and hope that that will be up and running at the end of next year. We've just this summer taken delivery of our 4th electric bin lorry, and so there's no more capacity to have electric bin lorries at Waterbeach until we have the solar PV. However, using the hydrogenated vegetable oil has been really successful, more successful than we actually imagined, as has been mentioned by Andrew, and we're rolling that out to, for example, the generators at the folk festival and things. So despite the delay in that, it hasn't meant that we're not still cutting our emissions from our fleet. Thanks.
Thank you. I think, Joe, were you going to answer the first
Yeah,
question?
thank you, Chair. Councillor Swift. Yes, on-street charge points are reasonably expensive. It does depend on the rate of charge. So those 2 schemes around Defreville and Riverside were predominantly to service the residential community where there wasn't off-street parking. It's always cheaper to have your own charge point on your own driveway, and then you can manage your own tariffs. However, the on-street infrastructure tends to be capital funded, and then the revenue that's generated supports the upkeep and maintenance of the units, and so necessarily there is a margin on them. Generally speaking, the charge points in those areas, they're actually, that contract is managed by the county council because it's on street, and it's managed through BP Pulse. They were the successful contractor for that contract. The costs tend to be for rapid charging between 70 and 80p per kilowatt hour, for slower sort of overnight charging somewhere between 40 and 50p a kilowatt hour on those public networks, and that's pretty competitive. And as I understand it, those BP charge points are within the sort of competitive range that's normal across the country.
Thank you very much. So it's Councillor Glassberg has another question, then Councillor
Yeah, can I just ask my other question? Going back to what you said at the beginning about the herbicide trials. Obviously, I'm sure that other people have been having, like I have, lots of residents saying that there are problems with all the weeds in the gutter. And certainly we've had, now I'm getting quite a lot of people, now it's raining very heavily, saying that the drains are blocked and it's causing the drain pipes to back up and problems within their houses. So I think that we really do need to be addressing this. And at the question that was asked by Pesticide Free Cambridge at the last meeting was about the kind of the communications that the council was undertaking about this, as well as the new machines. And I understand the new machines are great, and I've seen them in use, in Newnham, and they do work. But I think that we need to know when are they going to be used in each area. They said there's a rolling programme. I think it would be helpful for councillors to know that so that we can be informing residents.
Thank you. I was just going to say that I can answer that for you because it isn't part of the climate change exactly, but I did ask the question because it was in the minutes, as I said earlier. And Alistair Wilson has sent me detailed response, and I'm quite happy to send it on to you. So I'll forward the email with all the information.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Can I just ask one quick thing as well about the recycling? Obviously, the government is going to be introducing a deposit return scheme in 2027, I think it is. But I just wondered whether the council would consider a scheme that is been trialled in other areas for recycling scheme within shops where there is a machine that gives credits to people. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's apparently been quite successful in West Suffolk. I just wonder whether the council would consider looking at this, because I think it could be a positive way to remind people about the importance of recycling. It's quite easy, it happens in shops. Apparently it doesn't cost people a lot of money, and retailers are quite keen on it because it means that people can spend their credits within their shop.
Sounds very much like when we were children, and we always took our Tizer bottles back and got our deposit back and then bought another one, as you say, yeah. Should we have, yes, one more question from you, Eva, and then a response, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good idea with supermarkets. I know it's successful in Europe as well. In Germany and Spain, they have it in Croatia too. So my question is regarding the leisure sites. So if we look at the council's emissions, one of the main sources, or the second most main source of carbon emitter for the council is our leisure sites. And they consume the most gas of all the groups of sites in 2023 to 2024. My question is, since they're one of our biggest emitters and then they're so vital for many of our residents, is there anything more that can be done in the future to reduce their emissions further?
Councillor Payne, would you like to ask your question? And then...
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the huge amount of detail that's gone into this report. I just want to ask one quick question on Appendix A, reference 1.8. So there's a reference to, and I think we've approved in the General Fund budget for the last couple of years, to moving into the money from the council reserves to fund possible green investments in future. And I can see there's obviously across 2 milestones where we've been looking for what those green investments might be. I just wondered if you could give us a flavour of what those might look like, whether there's anything that we are considering investing in the future, whether there's anything we've looked at that hasn't been successful.
Are we happy to take those two, Andrew?
Kind of, were we aware of the deposit return scheme and would we look into it and that kind of thing?
I was asking whether the council could consider looking into it. I mean, as Councillor Djokovic has said, this is very common in other European countries, and I think it could be really successful in Cambridge. As I say, there's a trial that's been run in West Suffolk, and I can find out more about that and give you information if the council would consider looking into it.
We'd always consider looking into things, and we might even look into them. So, yeah, I think it would be interesting to find out more about that. I can't make any more promise or commitment, but it would be really helpful to kind of know more about how it works and so on. So if you've got some links, thank you very much for that. And so, leisure sites. Is there more we can do? Yes. That wouldn't be a very helpful answer, would it? There's the brilliant leisure manager we have, Ian Ross, is always looking for kind of ways to kind of reduce our emissions from the pools. And he's done a number of things over the years. There's kind of many kind of interventions we've made. And because there was such a massive amount of gas burnt there and electricity used as well. And until you go there and kind of crawl behind the scenes under the floors and in the back rooms and so on, you don't realise how much power they use, because it's not just heating the water. It's kind of recycling the air and the water and pumping things around, and kind of there's a vast amount that goes into it. But we've made great strides. There's lots of solar panels on the pools. There's air source heat pumps, and there's kind of all sorts of energy efficient measures go on. And we are looking at further actions, and we'll be applying for funding to kind of do more over the coming year. Ultimately, we had a discussion last year around the district heat network idea. And if that comes to fruition and is possible to implement, then I would very much hope we could be able to kind of connect Parkside, for instance, to that, which would then hopefully, again, take further chunks out of the amount of fossil fuels that we use there. So there's a lot of thought and work goes into it. Because it's our biggest emitter, we're always looking at ways we can do it. I mean, there's a lot of, we've probably done the cheaper, more technically easy things, so you're into the kind of the hard things now, but I think there's a definite intent to keep going on that and across all of our assets, basically. So, yes, I hope that helps. It's a sensible kind of answer. And Councillor Payne, kind of, I think Councillor Hawke asked a similar question, and I said I didn't know, and I'd get back. I think whether we've actually made any green investments, I don't know, but I'll ask the finance people to kind of get an answer for that, if that's helpful.
Thank you. I think time is getting on now, so I'll take one last question from Councillor Ashton, and then I'd like to ask a question, and I think we probably should move to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite simple, really. Page 32, with the Green Business Programme, we've said how we're going to try and help businesses, local businesses, improve their emissions. It seems to lack on detail how they can apply for that. And also it would be good, once that gets running, to have like a rolling number of how many businesses we are attracting into it. Because I think it's one of those things that once you get that momentum going, other people will then see the why they should be part of it as well. So I can imagine it'd be very slow to begin with, but once we can get it moving, I think people will be attracted to it, especially with the results that would follow. So,
Thank you. And I would just like to ask you about the 50 council houses that are undertaking retrofitting programmes. Now, quite a few of them are in my ward, which is Romsey, and I've watched the work progressing, and they actually look so much nicer now. But I just wondered if you'd done any consultation with the residents, how they'd found it, and whether they were getting improvement in their energy bills, and whether it was coming up to expectation, or is it too early days?
Thank you, Chair. So on Councillor Ashton's point, yeah, I think we're working with Alia on that in PECT. So we get the money and then we give the money and they give the money and so on. I think it's one of those interesting lessons about the bureaucracy of all of this kind of public sector funding that we asked them to develop a plan to tell us how they were going to use the money and kind of so on. And just a lot of small businesses just haven't got the time and capacity to do that. They just want the money to kind of do the work. So I think we're really looking at that. And Gemma Little, our economic development manager, is kind of running that programme and is kind of, reflecting on, is it the best way to do it? Are there other ways that you could achieve more and so on and so on? But in terms of how many have taken that up, I can ask her to kind of let the committee know. And your point about promoting what we do and what people can do, absolutely well made. We try every conceivable kind of way of communicating and engaging with people. And what you tend to find is, so I've spent some Saturdays of my life at kind of events around the city saying, hey, come and find out all about this, that and the other. And the people who turn up are the people who already know. So it is quite a challenge. And I think this is not unique to Cambridge. This is across the whole country, maybe across the whole world. But there's this massive global kind of challenge. And yet making people feel that it's something they can and they should do something about remains a challenge. And I think personally, this is my personal view, that there is something about the public debate at national level, what governments signal in terms of how okay is it to keep burning through all sorts of resources. The fashion industry, the food industry, holidays and travel, which we all enjoy, there's no compulsion to do anything differently. So we'll keep on choosing the things that we enjoy doing. So sorry, that's kind of a personal kind of reflection, and kind of maybe this might be the last committee report I introduce in my fabulous career at the council. But I find it's been something that's bugged us, and we've worked on and we've looked at. We've talked to kind of academic experts at university about behaviour change and so on. And there's that thing about you don't want to guilt trip people, but you do want them to understand the impacts and implications of their choices. So I think we put out all sorts of information through Cambridge Matters, press releases, social media and so on. We make films, we make animations, we invite people to kind of do things like the carbon footprint kind of calculator and kind of their own personal action planning. I know there are families who kind of almost have violent family arguments about kind of how they could do more and challenge each other around that. And I know the domestic discussions that go on across my kitchen table about whether we should be buying berries all year round or not. It's something that every person, every family kind of needs to kind of have that conversation, every business, every organisation. We go into schools, we work with others, we kind of go, we try and kind of raise, and you all do as well, I'm sure, through your own work. So it's just something we're going to keep doing. But any ideas of kind of how you kind of actually make an impact, it doesn't just look like crowing, because we're not here just to kind of say, hey, look, we're fantastic. I mean, you might like us to do that, but you can do that through your political channels. We're trying to educate people about the choices they have the power to make and the lives that they can choose to live for the betterment of the planet. And I hope Cambridge is in the forefront of that, but we're always up for learning from others as well. That was a bit of a rant. Sorry, did I answer a question? I don't know, but we tried. And in terms of the net zero homes in Romsey, that, as you say, it's a programme that's in progress. So we're hoping to kind of get it completed by March. My understanding or expectation or guess would be that there'll be some after action occupancy kind of survey. So are you actually using the things that you've now got, or are you just turning the heat up to max and leaving the windows open and kind of defeating the object of the exercise? There's a lot of education that goes into helping people get the most out of this. It's quite an expensive kind of thing, but working with the residents, the tenants, to kind of understand what they've got. Again, it's that thing about education, about what's within your gift to do now, we're giving you the opportunity to have low fuel bills. How people then live, we can't force or compel or control, but I think we are planning to do an after-action survey. Is that right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that 2.9 in the action plan mentions the update provided to us by the officer that says spring 2025 is the hopeful deadline of completing it, but that it will be followed by extended monitoring and evaluation. So I would think that would include how the occupants use the building and obviously to try and maximise that as well and make sure everyone's happy and that what findings come from it are as clear as possible and as, as transparent and as helpful as possible.
Thank you very much. So one very last question from Councillor Swift, and then we'll move to the vote.
Thanks, Chair. My one's about sustainable food, and I've read with interest pages 47 to 49 about sustainable food in Cambridge. I'm the lead councillor for food hubs as a sort of new position. I've been interested in food sustainability and food justice for several years, and I was having a chat with Anne Mitchell yesterday, who's one of the founders of Cambridge Sustainable Food, and she was saying that really food justice is not just about food at all, and I know that everyone in this room will be aware of this, but I'd just like to sort of talk a tiny bit about it. It's actually about empowering communities and the whole of people within communities. And it's about sustainability in the long term. And that's actually keys in with climate change and all sorts of other things. So it's a much bigger picture. I'm going to be meeting all of the people in the local food justice community from the, for example, Sam Dyer and Gavin Shelton and Francesca Manning, who's the Global Food Security person in the university. And in particular, I'm interested in the future of social supermarkets, which is the big new model that's being rolled out at the moment, as I'm sure everyone is aware, and what we can do for long-term viability of social supermarkets with limited government funding. And I noticed with interest today, the front page of the Financial Times has a complete reversal of everything that everyone has been led to expect with Rachel Reed's 30th of October budget. She's actually thinking of not making cuts in a la George Osborne, but actually investing in infrastructure renewal and all the things that most of us believe in. So I'm very pleased about that. And I will be reporting back after I've chatted with everyone to this Scrutiny Committee with any new ideas and initiatives. And a sort of question would be, are there any plans to develop close links with other areas of council work, for example, in connection with climate change and food sustainability? So I don't know if that's an actual question, but that's the sort of work direction in which I'd be interested to know your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Do you have a response?
Well, thanks, and I think it's great that to hear of the work you'll be doing kind of on this agenda. I'm not quite sure I fully kind of understand the question, and maybe it would be sensible for kind of colleagues to kind of meet outside the meeting. But I think the council's involvement in food sustainability, food justice, food poverty, and so on covers a range of kind of of agendas, as you say, and definitely reducing the kind of the carbon environmental impacts of the whole food production, consumption, retail kind of industry has been a part of that, and working with CSF and others, to secure the gold kind of standard, for instance, was important. So some of you would have been in this committee meeting when we discussed the council's own, catering for civic events, which I think only amounts to about 2 or 3 meals per year per 100 people or whatever, but that is now 100% vegan. So we kind of worked up towards that, and that's where we are. We're trying to model an example, and kind of lead by example and so on. And that was, I should give credit to kind of Councillor Copley, I think, who brought that kind of motion previously and so on, as well as former Councillor Collis. So I think that the climate change aspect of the food sustainability thing is something that is of importance to us. There was another motion that came to council, was it the Edinburgh or the Glasgow Declaration, I think, a Scottish city. There's a motion around that. there's only so much that a city can do, you know, like ours. We don't have farms, we don't have kind of, you know, controlled. Do we have co-farm? We do, sorry. I was thinking of the county farms, but anyway, but we do what we can, and we seek to influence and lead. And I think we'll continue to want to do that. And if I can beg your indulgence, kind of, Councillor Pat, or just to Councillor Moore to come in.
Actually, Sam was happy to give a response if you prefer, but it. And I'll come back to you, Rosie, if you like. Oh, I beg your pardon.
I had a kind of more general kind of closing comment. I don't know if we've reached the end of it or whether people want to continue talking about it.
I'm just going to give just a couple of points on the food. We are particularly looking at our community centres and how we better utilise those as sort of hubs. So very recently, Trumpeton Pavilion have taken over into a food hub. And to your point about its role delivering a more, I guess, wider benefits to the community, we've got funding from the health service to actually do some in-depth work around the value of and improvements to people's health around that, and also have CAB and others there. So they now have a permanent place in Trumpington. And I mean, we do and fund Co-Farm to continue to try and grow their work. That was no pun intended. Also, we talked about businesses, but actually enhancing their work so that they can actually support businesses across the city. And with Cambridge Sustainable Food, we are continually in discussions about how we can support their growth in the city through our community centres. So there's a number of things we can probably report back over the next few months.
Thank you very much. Did anybody else? Did you want to come in, Rosie, at all? Or I think we've probably covered everything there. So I would like.
Yeah, if anybody would beg the committee's indulgence for another 30 seconds, I suppose I just wanted to kind of say how significant the political leadership on this agenda is in Cambridge and Cambridge City Council. So, again, my reflection, my observation, 14 years in the council, there are a number of really, really talented officers you've got who are absolutely passionate and committed and highly knowledgeable about this. But your leadership as well, including coming to this committee, that the depth of interest and knowledge you've shown from across the chamber is really important. Of course, under different administrations, and current leadership kind of has been very strong as well. And that makes a difference to kind of recruitment. So I've been kind of involved in some recruitment for the new director post that's been created, and a number of those people mentioned why they wanted to come and work in Cambridge from other great jobs they're doing in other parts of the country was because they know that your political commitment to this agenda is real. So, I would just say as almost a parting kind of, encouragement to kind of continue kind of challenging officers to kind of go further, do more on this agenda. It's not going to become any less important to kind of the future of the planet. And it gives us tremendous kind of, encouragement, challenge. Don't always enjoy that, but, it's kind of, it gives leadership, and that's really, really powerful and important for the future of the council of the city. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that comment. I think it is fair to say we are all really committed, and we appreciate the work you do, and whatever we can do to support that, we will. So now I'd like to move to the vote, please. We have three things to vote on. It's on page 20, the recommendations of your pack, agenda pack. Are we all happy that we take all three in one vote? Yes. So can I ask, please, then, all those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And can I ask the Executive Councillor for Climate Change, Councillor Moore, if you accept our recommendation?
Yes, I'm very happy to accept the recommendations. Thank you. It's been a really good and interesting debate. Obviously, would like to thank Andrew for the whole team, Andrew and Janet, for all of their work, on the report, but obviously everything that's gone into the report. And this report isn't just the last year, but builds on the many years previously. But particular thanks to Andrew. As he mentioned, he's leaving, so we will miss you very much. You've been really fantastic to work with and made such a big difference across the council, but especially in my experience in this area. So thank you very much. As we could see tonight, the broad range of his knowledge and expertise, and it's really made a difference. So thank you.
Thank you. Would members like a brief break, or are you happy to move on to the next item? Oh. Should we have 5 minutes then? Is that long enough? Yeah, just after 7:30. Welcome back. We're going to move on now to agenda item 6, our final item, and it's a consultation on the expansion of the smoke control area in Cambridge. And Joe Dix is going to, he's Environmental Quality and Growth Manager, is going to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this will be a quick and uncontroversial item. So we're bringing forward a consultation on expanding our legally binding smoke control areas in response to two things. One is the Council's ambition to meet World Health Organization air quality standards, particularly in relation to PM2.5, which is small particulates, and solid fuel burning is the largest single source of PM2.5 emissions in Cambridge, and it accounts for 40% of those emissions. The other reason is the Environment Act 2022 brought forward some subtle changes to smoke control legislation, which is ruled under the Clean Air Act 1993 in general, but actually hasn't been much updated since the 1960s and 70s, when Cambridge's 3 smoke control areas were introduced, predominantly to deal with coal-fired heating in homes. The smoke control programme from the 60s and 70s ceased then because of the introduction of North Sea gas and the switch of most people over to gas for their heating over that time. So this proposal has been underpinned by an independent report commissioned by the City Council to look at the air quality, the health impacts and the socio-economic impacts of introducing a policy like this. Our recommendation is that we would bring in a council area-wide smoke control area rather than just 3 small areas in the city centre. And also, because of the legislation in 2022, we are now able to include riverboats, houseboats in the smoke control regulatory environment. So our proposal is also to do that, because although there are a small number of those, they do generate a significant amount of smoke nuisance and so on. As I said, it's backed up by a technical report and online patiently waiting. I have 2 colleagues from Logica Air Quality Consultants, Claire Beattie and David Birchby, who are online and can answer any questions you have about the technical report, which was appended with the proposal. But basically, this is a proposal to go out to the public, give them a simplified version of the technical basis for taking this forward, and to try and find out whether there are any other issues that we haven't raised that could impact on people from the introduction of this scheme through a consultation, and then to come back to you in 6 months' time or so, or 9 months' time, and implement the outcome of that consultation. So I think I'll leave it there and open to questions.
Thank you very much, Joe. And my apologies, I didn't introduce Elizabeth Bruce, who is our scientific officer and also here to help with any questions. So we'll go to the debate now. So if I can have Councillor Nesta, Councillor Ashton, Councillor Houck.
Thank you very much, Joe, and I really welcome the public consultation. Castleward, some of the residents have pointed out very specific examples as to why basically the ban couldn't apply to the board. So I know that we're going to be very welcome in the consultation. But my question is in relation to sort of page 87 and 88. And can you clarify the impact that more vessels have on the particulate less than 2.5 micrometers, and how much they would be impacted by the extension of the smoke control area? And the report says that there is a disproportionately high number of complaints about smoke that are about sort of the houseboats, but also that most of them are already burning approved smokeless fuels, so would not be impacted. So we just needed to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton, would you like to make your question as well?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, two easy questions. How do we enforce our current smoke control areas, and how would we enforce it if we extended it across the city? And finally, would this cover barbecues and bonfires? Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to take those, Joe?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would. Okay, so Councillor Nesta, how much would the impact be? Well, it's set out in the technical report exactly what the emission savings could be from implementing this, if that was your question. But if it's more about the impact on the boat owners themselves that you want to know.
Yes, please.
It is. So, as a result of this regulation, people can still burn stuff in either an approved appliance. They can burn wood that meets the dry wood specification in an approved appliance, or they can continue to burn approved fuel, smokeless solid fuel. It's true that probably most boat owners do burn this already, but there are probably a number that don't. And we intend to follow up following this committee session with a survey of boat owners to see exactly what their burning habits are, as much as we can establish that. And so that will feed into the consultation process. Councillor Ashton, how will it be enforced? Well, we've already actually, the legislation has come in, so the 2022 legislation came in, and we actually brought a report to this committee to show how it was going to be regulated last year. So our private sector housing team and domestic team would take on that regulation. In fact, they already have. We've published a protocol for that. The likelihood is that it would be mostly reliant on public complaints about smoke, which we would then have to investigate. And the likelihood is that regulation would first take the form of a warning before there'd be any sort of punitive prosecutions. So we intend to, once we bring it in, widely publicise the changes, and then that will probably trigger some complaint activity. And the likelihood is that there will be an initial period where there'd be a bit of enforcement, and after that it would likely settle. Is that helpful? Sorry, barbecue and bonfires, yeah.
Going back to the enforcement, have we actually prosecuted anybody so far for being in those areas?
I believe we haven't made any prosecutions under the Smoke Control Act for very many years, decades. Not during the time I've been here, and it's nearly 27 years now. So, yeah. In terms of bonfires and barbecues, no, it doesn't. It's about burning within a domestic premises.
Thanks, Chair. This is related to what we've just been talking about.
Sorry, Councillor Swift, it was Councillor
sorry.
next, and then you afterwards.
Thank you. I'm not sure if the sequence matters, but I'll just ask my couple of questions. It all makes perfect sense to me. So my main question actually is sort of what kind of outcome can we expect from the consultation that really might change something substantial in this proposal? I mean, it sounds like this proposal is based on clear evidence. It will improve public health, might even save lives. So what could possibly, change parts of this plan following this consultation? You already answered Councillor Ashton's question about enforcement, so I don't have to ask it anymore. But I do have some maybe nerdy question about paragraph 4.5.3, just the numbers. I couldn't really make the numbers add up. So it says 1,300 households would feel a change in their living and working conditions. But this is sort of based on, it says 7.8% of 4,918, which is 383, and then it says something about 2% of this 7.8%, which would actually be 8. So I just couldn't really follow how these 1,300 homes, where that number came from. Thank you.
Councillor Swift, if you'd like to ask your question, then.
Thanks, Chair, and sorry, Councillor Howe, for pushing in. It's related to the about smokeless fuel. Are smokeless fuels and approved stoves readily available, and are they much more expensive than the polluting kind? That's just I don't really know much about this area. I just would like to hear your views on that, please.
So I'll take the question about fuels first. The same 2022 legislation brought in new regulations around the sale of fuels, and so retailers are only allowed to supply approved fuels. So whether they're cheap or expensive is sort of neither here nor there. It's so there is that. Sorry, can you just repeat your first question?
Are smokeless fuels and approved stoves readily
Yes.
available? And are they much more expensive than the polluting kind?
Yeah, so stoves, they are more expensive. There's no doubt about that. And I think that the evidence is fairly weak about how good they are, but they are, defined within the legislation and so on. So yes, they are available. Whether they are available in adequate sizes and so on for riverboats, that's something we want to establish. We want to make sure that, we're not unduly, prejudicing riverboats who are reliant on solid fuel to a certain extent at the moment. And that's something we've explored, and that's why there are options in the paper. Okay, thanks. We'll come back to Councillor Hanks' questions, if I may, Chair, thanks. I might refer some of these to my colleagues because they are more technical. I think the first one was really about what could change in the report as a result of consultation. Was that the question? So if I answer that one, I think, well, there are choices to be made about largely whether we include or don't include riverboats. So I think that's something that could change at consultation. And perhaps I could bring in Claire Claire Beattie, and she could tell you a little bit more about the relative impact in terms of air quality of including and not including riverboats, because that's something that's quite marginal because of the small numbers.
So, sorry, I'm just trying to find the relevant bit of our report. In terms of the relative sort of emission savings from river vessels, so in terms of baseline emissions from residential properties, from domestic solid fuel burning, we've estimated kind of around 26 to 27 tonnes per annum, whereas for river vessels that figure is less than 1 tonne, so it's about 3/4 of a tonne, and that's basically just because of numbers, burning habits, etc. Does that answer the question about relative?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Your other question.
1,300 homes, so where that number came from. 1,100 homes.
So I think if I have to refer back to Claire as well. I mean, these were based on estimates from government surveys about in relation to the number of homes in the city and how many are reliant on solid fuel burning for their main source of heat.
I'm going to pass over to David. Was this in section 5.2.2?
It is, according to my notes, 4.5.3. There is percents in their numbers, and it didn't follow. These 1,300 households just didn't follow from any of these percentages that I saw there. But yeah, would be happy to maybe get an answer by email.
I think the numbers you were talking about are, I may well hand over to David. I think it's in the copy I've got off the website, page 32, in terms of the numbers of households that fall into various groups. David, are you happy to?
Yeah, I'm happy to come in. Yeah, thanks, Claire, and good evening, everybody. Yes, so I think I can see the section of the paper you're looking at. It says 2.1% of the 7.8% are estimated to be still using an open fire or non-exempt stove. So just to say, so what we've done there is we've taken from the 2021 census data the figure of 7.8% of households are using two sources of heating in their home. So there we're assuming, you know, that's where they may have a solid fuel appliance alongside a central heating system fueled by gas. So that's where the 7.8% comes from. And then what that sentence is saying is, from a national survey run by Kantar, which focuses on solid fuel burning, around 25% of all households that are burning solid fuels, around 25% are doing so on a stove or an appliance, which wouldn't be exempt under a smoke control area. So it wouldn't be compliant with smoke control area. So what we're saying there is about, so 7.8% of households have a solid fuel appliance, and around 25% of those households would be using a non-exempt appliance. So that's how we get to the 1,300 properties. So I just think that sentence where it says 2.1% of 7.8%, what it's saying is actually it's talking in percentage point terms. So it's still 25% of the 7.8%, which equates to 2.1. Hopefully I've explained that.
I mean, I'm happy to let this go for now. I'm afraid, I mean, the last sentence is therefore, but I really cannot, because 7.8% of the 4,918, somehow it's 330. Anyway, I couldn't quite come to this conclusion there from this paragraph, but I'm sure you know what you're doing.
Thank you. It may be possible at some point to clarify that a little bit more for us. If we
can get that
it.
clarified.
Thank you,
if necessary.
So, Councillor Glassberg, your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you very much for this report. I really welcome it because I think that this is a very important issue. Newnham, which I represent, is already a supposedly smoke-free area. So I think it would be really good to extend it to the whole city. But my question really is about, well, like Councillor Nestor, I have had quite a lot of complaints in my area from people who are concerned about other people burning fuel. And I just wanted to ask you, okay, so I think it's important that people will understand that this is not a blanket ban on burning anything, because otherwise we are going to be inundated with complaints. But I just wanted to know, so the fact that people can burn in an approved appliance and they can burn smokeless fuel, how are those, and are they really not harmful at all?
I mean, there still remains a harm from any combustion process. There's no safe level of PM2.5. So.
But how much safer are they? Because that is what people are going to be asking us.
So all we can do, and perhaps Claire can come in here and perhaps understand how much we will cut emissions by. That's all we can do, and the technical work has underpinned that. So in all of the scenarios where we expand the smoke control area, there is an improvement in emissions. Perhaps Claire, you could just give an indication of the scale of that from the report.
Yeah. So I think it's worth pointing out that there's a number of uncertainties in the technical work that we've done, that we've sort of tried to set out quite clearly in the report. But I think the emissions reductions that we're showing, based on the assumptions that we've made, and our assumptions are largely from originally from a nationwide survey undertaken by Kantar on behalf of DEFRA around people's behaviours inside and outside of smoke control areas. So how much they're burning, what they're burning in terms of wood versus coal products, what type of stove they're burning on. So your questions about exempt stoves and non-exempt stoves, and are they actually better? There is uncertainty around that, and there's definitely uncertainty around the numbers of people who may have bought stoves that are already exempt, because it's worth pointing out that there's been further legislation on the sale of stoves that is just kind of coming through the process now, where you will only be able to buy what are termed eco-design stoves. So people that have bought stoves fairly recently will have a lower emission profile than those who have got old stoves, generally speaking, but there's lots of variation around that. So that the figures that we have been coming up with for so the scenarios we looked at were kind of including and not including river vessels. Obviously, we've discussed they're a fairly small proportion, but we're looking in the range of sort of 70% reduction of PM 2.5 from domestic solid fuel burning. That, as I say, even if that's an overestimate, we're still looking at a fairly substantial reduction. And because of the uncertainty, we run some sensitivity tests around that. So looking at if 25% of the population didn't abide by the legislation, or the assumptions around kind of the different stoves that people are using and the proportions of the population using those different stoves. So we've done a couple of sensitivity tests, and they reduce the improvement by, well, 15% in terms of the stove assumption sensitivity test, and by about sort of 10%, so reducing from around 70% to around 62% with a 25% non-compliance assumption. So I think it just gives us confidence that even if we don't achieve those levels of reductions, a reduction of PM 2.5 of domestic solid fuel burning, even in that ballpark, it is definitely worth going for. I think it's the source that's probably the biggest bang for your buck.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yeah.
That's great, but that's sort of done on looking at it over the whole city, for example. But what about per stove? I mean, what's the difference? What kind of difference would it make having a compliant stove and a non-compliant one? Because that's the kind of thing people are going to ask me.
I can get back to you with kind of some of the assumptions on the emission factors we've used within the work, and that will show you the sort of levels of variation between burning wood on what we've classed as a compliant stove and burning wood on an older stove. Yeah, that's
okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks very much, Claire. I think that'd be very helpful. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Lester and Councillor Dubkovic, and then I think. Okay, if it's quick, please. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you very much for the again for the report. You can really see that it's actually evidence-based policy that is taking place, which is actually very important, which is good. I just wanted to make perhaps a comment more than a question, that when going through the consultation, like the narrative and the messaging has to be very clear. If you tell people like a PM of 2.5, like they wouldn't know what that means. So for example, just how many suitcases full of smoke pollution will you be reducing? So it's something that people can really relate to, or how many full stoves, but depends on how many stoves there are. So I think like basically suitcases is a very good comparison, but just I think the messaging has to be right. Otherwise people are going to say, why can I not actually not have a fire in my house, basically. So just that. Thank you.
Thank you for that point, Councillor Lester. Do you want to make your point, Councillor Dubkovic?
Thank you, Chair. Is there anything else that we can do in the city that will have the same air quality impact as extending the smoke-controlled area in the city? Thank you.
And Councillor Swift, would you like to answer?
Yeah, mine's almost the same. But what are the plans for the consultation on expanding the smoke-controlled areas? Which is sort of.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. I think for us, the big part of the consultation is actually awareness raising, and that is the reason for doing it. We've already started to put together plans about how we actually reach the people across the community, which I think has been addressed today about how difficult that can be, but we've already got ideas making sure we get out to the older population who aren't necessarily online for the consultation, getting out to more vulnerable groups. If there's language issues workshops or attending other community groups. The big part of it is then making it clear we're not saying you can't burn, we need better burning, and that is, I would say, the biggest reason for this consultation is behavioural change, because there is so much unknown, which the report has demonstrated. There's so much uncertainty, and so I think that is, we're starting to put together a plan, and we're not going to rush it because we want to get it right and have a good lead in time so we can get things in place properly.
Thank you, Chair. And just to cover off Councillor Dubkovic's ask, which is there anything else we can do? Well, in terms of PM 2.5, as I've said, locally, domestic burning is the biggest single source. So it's really something we do have to tackle. There are multiple sources of air pollution, obviously, industrial, commercial, transport. Transport's something we have focused on through successive air quality review and assessments and action plans over the last 20 years. It's something that will actually be dealt with more significantly in the future by policy around electric vehicles, really, because all that will remain then are things like tyre and brake wear as sources of particles from road vehicles. And that's something that's got to be tackled, by industry, really, to try and reduce that. So I think that in terms of local action, this is the next big thing after sort of dealing with internal combustion engines.
And do you have a response for Councillor Swift?
I think did Elizabeth's answer cover off some of what you were asking about consultation?
Oh, yeah, I'm not quite sure. Well, the plans for the consultation on expanding the smoke control areas. Are there any plans that you know of that will actually be brought in to actually deal with that, or is it sort of, do you think it's actually been solved already? It's been had enough consultation to actually not need to have any further engagement with the public?
No, I think we are going to do significantly more consultation on this.
Whilst we don't, DEFRA states that if we want to consider bringing in more vessels, we have to consult. If we were just looking to consider expanding it internally, we don't have to do a formal consultation. But going back to what Councillor Nesta said, I think awareness raising and education is the only way we're going to have any impact. I think as much as expanding it and enforcing it will be beneficial, it's behaviour change that is going to have the biggest impact. So I think that's, the consultation is valuable for achieving that.
Thank you very much. That's nice and clear. Councillor Hauck would like to ask a very speedy question, and then we'll move to the vote.
I don't want to ask a question. I would like to apologise to the officers, because I've just figured out my mistake. It says 7.8% or 4,900 properties, not of 4,900 properties, and then 2.1% are 25% of these 7.8, more or less, and that leads to 1,300 households, so we can all sleep well tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you ever so much for your work on this, because we all know that the health problems, the poor air quality is becoming more and more clear, isn't it? That it's really, really important. So thank you for your work on this, and I think it's really very, very fine. So I'm going to move to the vote now, and the recommendations are on page 83. Thank you. And there is just one recommendation. So, all those in favour of the recommendation?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous, so thank you very much. And to our Environmental Executive Councillor Rosie Moore, are you happy to accept our recommendations?
Yes, I'm happy to accept the recommendations. Thank you for all. I mean, it was a huge amount of work has gone into this, and obviously from the debate, it's really an important topic to many councillors and the health of our residents. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That concludes our meeting. It's been really interesting and informative tonight. So thank you, and a huge amount of work I appreciate from all the officers. So thank you all very much. Also thank you to all councillors, because the scrutiny and the interest that everybody's taken, which is really important, has been excellent. So thank you all very much. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to James for the minutes. Working hard there. So I wish you all good night and a safe journey home. Thanks.